Welcome to the Sleeping Barber Podcast.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. I'm really excited about this episode. Alan's a legendary music historian, and we got a chance to explore the 4 Ps of marketing with him. From the album Sgt. Pepper Lonely Hearts Club Band to Radiohead's pricing model within Rainbows to the impact that streaming and social have had on marketing music. I hope you enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Sleeping Barber Podcast, a place for business leaders to get the best and most credible information on marketing, strategy, and innovation. Your hosts, Marc, Binkley, and Vassilis Douros, share their experiences as they gather insights from the world's leading experts. Now, on with the show.
And just before we get started with this episode, Dee and I would love it if you could leave a review. Your feedback means a lot to us. It really helps us make the show better, and we really want to make this super valuable to you.
Welcome back to the Sleeping Barber. Today we've got Alan Cross, internationally known broadcaster, interviewer, writer, consultant, blogger, and speaker, who's interviewed the biggest names in rock and roll, known as a musicologist and a documentarian, over 45 years through programs like The Ongoing History of New Music, with over 1,050 radio shows and 30 million downloads.
That's insane.
Yeah, has been deeply involved in exploring the present and future relationships between music, technology, and social networking. We'll put a link to all of Alan's things in the show notes below. And Alan, just thanks for joining us on the show today.
Oh, you're very welcome. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I was super excited. It was just in the preamble here. I was just talking about how I heard you speaking on of all things, my wife's accounting podcast. Talking about
that must be, I'm sorry, that's got to be riveting.
It was awesome. It was really great. And so as you were going through, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. We got to ask him to be on the show. The music industry itself has had radical changes over the last 100 years, not unlike a lot of other businesses. But in today's episode, we're going to dig into a lot of the significant moments and milestones across the 4 Ps of marketing, but specifically digging into the marketing component, like the promotional component of music and musicians. So Alan, thanks for joining us again.
Okay, you're welcome. Let's go.
How do people, for people wanting to know about how to become a music historian, how did you get into that kind of a position?
It was a total fluke. Listen, I did not set out to do this. I was, oh God, it's such a long story, but I was assigned a project that I did not want back in 1992. And it was either do this ongoing history thing, or find yourself a new vocation. So I had just gotten married. I just built my first house. I had absolutely no choice. So I dove into it. But the weird thing is, and this is life, things zig and zag completely unpredictably. And frankly, as miserable as I was for those first, let's call it 12 to 18 months, I wouldn't be here talking to you if it wasn't for that. It was a situation where you take lemons and you try to make lemonade, and then all of a sudden you end up with some pretty good wine after a while. That doesn't hold. I know that metaphor does not hold. But that's the way it really was. Everything has been a complete fluke. All the people that made my life miserable in those early days are either out of the business or dead. And I just keep going and going and going. I'm not really sure how or why, but I'm not going to complain. It's a fun way to make a living.
That's really cool, actually. When we're thinking about this and like the history side of music, obviously there's a transaction there that, the relation between the music itself, the technology. Now we can talk about the social networking side. Did that interest in those areas spawn just as the industry continued to mature, or were you able to identify that yourself kind of early as well?
Listen, it's all about adaptation. And radio people in the old days, well, still today, they have a best before date on their forehead that they can't see. So the whole idea is to be able to push back that best before date as much as you possibly can. You can't coast. You can't assume that the status quo is going to hold forever. You can't ignore technology. You can't ignore audience trends. You have to keep in touch with all these things. So it helps that I'm a bit of a tech nerd and a bit of a history nerd, and I can put those two things together. But yeah, it's been a real journey. When I first started, it was records and magnetic tape. Now everything is digital, and radio studios are completely different from how they were built even 30 years ago. Right. So there have been some very big changes to the technological side of things. consumer consumption of music has changed from physical product to digital product. Radio has a whole lot more competition than it did, even 30 years ago. So it's been one big continuous process of adaptation, adoption, and reinvention.
Speaking of that, I wanted to ask you about, as a starting point, to root us in a bit of this, talking about the product, and we'll use a couple albums as examples and moments in time as significant examples to highlight these things. But when it comes to, say, the Beatles, Sgt. Pepper, Lonely Hearts Club Band album, awesome album, everyone, like, big moment in time, epic, still epic. But when you think about the product of albums and artists and labels and that kind of stuff, how did the physical product that we think of an album define the music industry at that time?
Well, up until about 1965, 1966, popular music, and this is everything outside of Broadway jazz, Broadway show tunes, some jazz, and classical music. Popular music was considered to be disposable. A song would come out, it would be popular, and then fade away. The preferred medium for this was the 7-inch single, which was introduced by RCA in 1949. And previous to that, it was the 78 RPM record, which began showing up in the early 1900s. But by the time we get to 1965, 1966, you have certain artists, including the Beatles and Bob Dylan, transcending the simple single. And the album, which had been around since 1948, was starting to show signs of being a big moneymaker in the world of popular music. There was more margin on a 12-inch album than there were on singles. And artists were changing because now that they had about 22 minutes of music per side, they could expand their artistic palette to fill the container that they now had to work with. So by the time we get to Sgt. Pepper, which was released on June 1st, 1967, the record industry was starting to slightly sort of get more corporatized. That wouldn't really happen until the 1970s. But they were starting to say, well, wait a second, this pop music, this rock and roll thing it's actually really big business, and we could make it even bigger business if we found new avenues of revenue. And the album certainly was one of those avenues. So not only was it the single, but it was also the 8-track, it was the cassette, and then later the CD. So these have much higher margins than the 7-inch single. They were accepted by the public because they wanted more than one song or two songs, I guess, from their artists. And then we had the growth of FM radio, which was all about not playing singles, but playing tracks from albums. So by the time we get to the 1970s, the album is the thing. You buy the album, and only kids and only people who wanted the pop songs of the day bought singles. And they existed side by side. I mean, there's a reason for a single. We still use them today in terms of radio and playlists and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, the big shift was from 65 to about 1970 as artists and record labels moved away from singles to creating albums.
And is that also where we started seeing more of the creative side, like the album art that was being created, started becoming more of a marketing tool as well to help sell the albums?
Yeah, album cover artwork was pretty basic up until really the Beatles started coming along. I'm sure there were a few others. There were some jazz records in the early 60s that were kind of cool looking. But yeah, album artwork became a big thing because people would go into a record store and then often be tempted to buy something just on the way a record looked. Now, you didn't hear it on the radio. Many record stores wouldn't allow you to preview anything. You had to take a leap of faith based on how it looked. And we had record artwork studios pop up all over the world, and that was their job, to come up with packaging for an album.
In terms of the place at retail outlets, the record store, Sam the Record Man, all those kind of HMVs, like, what was the role of place in terms of people discovering music, and aside from just seeing the album itself?
Well, they were places to hang out. They were community centers. You would just go in and browse, not necessarily buy anything. You knew that you were going to run into like-minded people. You knew that you were going to stumble on something that you didn't know you needed. You would hear something being played in the store and go, "What's that?" and then pick it up. So they were real community hubs. Now they still are today. I mean, the record stores that we have today, the independent record stores and some one or two chains, they are still community centers. But with the advent of things like Record Store Day and special releases and that sort of thing, it's they've reclaimed that territory. And there's nothing like hanging out in a record store for an hour or so on a Saturday, just looking to see what's there.
Yeah, the discoverability is really, really. There's an element of nostalgia there, but I think there's more of even the younger generation starting to do more of that once again.
Well, they really like their physical product. We're seeing the pendulum swing back from unlimited streaming to something that is more tactile, something that I can hold in my hand, something that I can own and point to. Look at how many linear meters of records I have on the wall. That's how much I care about music. And a lot of these kids, or let's call them late adapters to vinyl, don't have a turntable, which is kind of cool, because what they can do is they can stream the music while holding the record in their hand, and they get the benefit of collecting and ownership without having to actually shell out for the equipment required to play the thing. I think the number is somewhere between 45 and 50%. Don't quote me on this, but I think it's between 45 and 50% of vinyl collectors today don't have a turntable.
Really?
That's wild.
Yeah.
That's insane.
In terms of, we're going to talk about, let's talk about Michael Jackson Thriller music video, because then I want to ask about the playbook overall at that time, because I think that was also one of those milestone moments. Thriller, the video came out in 1982, 83, and so that had everyone wanted to watch that video when it came out. It was totally 15 minutes or so. It was awesome. It was the coolest thing.
I think it was 17 minutes long. It was directed by John Landis, and it was the biggest budget music video of the time. And if I'm not mistaken, it actually premiered on primetime television. That's how big Michael Jackson was. Yeah. That's how much of a monoculture we had back then. Everybody knew Michael Jackson's name, and everybody wanted a piece of Michael Jackson. To the point where when we had limited TV, remember, network television was still the biggest thing ever.
Yeah.
They would hand over approximately, I can't remember what it was, half an hour, 60 minutes, whatever, to the premiere of a music video. And this wasn't the only time. I mean, remember the black and white video did exactly the same, and the Scream video, same kind of thing. So again, if we're talking about marketing and we're talking about music consumption, you can see how different things were. You would put, some videos, the Madonna, I can't remember which video it was, but the budget for her music video was $6 million. Now that's not so small Hollywood production or independent film. It's a big independent film. But back then, because of the high margins that CDs offered, money flowed like water in the music industry from about 1983 to 2000. So there were 17 years where you saw unbridled growth thanks to the CD, the music video, tours, and a growing fan base.
Right.
I mean, if we look at when the Beatles were around, there was 170, 180 million in the U.S. By the time I get to the 1980s, it's well over 200, moving towards 300 million. So the fan base had exploded. The music industry had become more globally integrated and flattened, not as flattened as it was going to be after streaming, but you had bigger and more global superstars, and Michael Jackson was at the top of that.
So at that point, what does the marketing playbook look like for an artist
today?
Well, at that point, and we'll compare it to today, because I know it's quite different today.
Okay, well, you wrote an album, you released an advance single maybe a week or two before the album came out. You made a really big deal of the album being in stores on release day. You had a couple of videos ready to go. You would line up several singles from the album well in advance. So there would be the advance single, then there would be the single that came out around release day or shortly thereafter, and then you'd have 2 or 3 or 4, or in Michael Jackson's case, a lot more from this particular album. So You would try to stretch out the album sales cycle as long as you possibly could. And within that would also be a tour of some sort, or there would be some other ways of doing things. For example, with Michael Jackson, he did the Pepsi commercial, which was a big deal.
Oh, yeah, right.
Where his hair blew up. You might get,
Right.
if you're lucky, a Super Bowl commercial or something along, or a Super Bowl halftime show or something along those lines. So you would have an army of people dedicated to making sure that as many people knew about this album as possible, that as many people heard this album as possible, and as many people bought this album as much as possible. Now, in those days, the record label just was concerned with record sales and radio airplay. That's all they really cared about. For things like tours and beyond, that was all the purview of the artist. And the artist would go out on tour to promote the album, which is why in many cases, the tour would lose money. But because this was promotion for a high margin thing that people were buying, it really didn't matter, because you would make up any losses on royalties for the albums that you sold as the result of the tour. And that's basically the model up until things started to break down in the early 2000s post-internet.
The one thing we haven't talked about yet, and it's and maybe it's perfect to kind of move into the after internet, so like more into in today's time. But it was in 2007, Radiohead released Rainbows. Can you tell us a little bit why it was a milestone in the pricing element of music history?
And now a short word from our sponsor.
This episode was sponsored by Quadical. Did I say that right? Quadical?
You did. Quadical. Yeah.
Quadical. Mark, what is it?
Well, V, I'm glad you asked. Quadical is my own company, actually. So, I'm the Sleeping Barber podcast co-host with you, but I also have my own company. And so I'm happy to sponsor the Sleeping Barber podcast.
Love that.
Because I give so much time to it. But Quadical is a fractional marketing leadership firm where we specialize in evidence-based marketing. And we do consulting work for companies typically between $30 to $300 million, and helping them navigate some of the challenges that people have, like, I know something's broken, but I'm not quite sure how to fix it, nor do I have the time to fix it. Fair. And so that's where we help out a lot of people.
Well, I'll speak for Mark as well, because you're wearing your Quadical hat right now. We appreciate your sponsorship of the Sleeping Barber podcast. And for all those that may be interested, we do have a whole bunch of sponsorship options. Always looking to bring on new sponsors. We have a lot of creative ideas that can really help across a global audience.
Thanks, V.
No, thank you, Quadical. We appreciate your business.
And now back to the show.
Yeah, the In Rainbows album was a grand experiment that can only be done once. Radiohead recorded this album in secret. It was announced 10 days before it was supposed to come out, and it was a tip jar approach. You could download it for absolutely free, or you could leave, a pay what you want kind of situation. And the idea was, Radiohead at this point was removed from their deal with EMI Records. They were a complete independent entity. They could do whatever they wanted. They thought, okay, well, here's a creative way to try and fight back against music piracy, which, of course, was the big thing, because streaming wasn't happening. Streaming really didn't start to happen until 2008. This is 2007. So they try and figure out a way around this. And so what they ended up doing was they released a free version, collected some money from fans for that. But then they also ended up selling physical versions, a couple of different physical versions. There was a CD, there was a vinyl box set that I ended up buying. And they made more money than they did on most of their EMI major label releases. So it was
that's crazy.
People thought that they were nuts doing this, but it worked out. I can't remember what the number is, but it's in the millions about how much money they made from this record, which they then toured, which they then reaped the success from the tour. Other people have tried something similar, but you can only be that one Radiohead groundbreaking record.
Yeah.
It did show that A, there were ways around music piracy,
right,
and B, it did show that fans who cared would support a band instead of everybody just taking everything online for free.
Yeah. And the online for free part is really, I remember I downloaded so much stuff on Napster. It was
everybody did.
So awesome. So much. But but there was definitely like this early 2000s, I think you were talking about, is this transition period between old world and new world, where you've got MP3s are becoming a thing. Streaming Not really early 2000s with Napster, but definitely sharing files and that kind of stuff. There's also American Idol around that time that launches.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah, and I kind of wonder if you can just comment on like the flux of what's going on in the industry at that point in time.
Yeah, nobody really knew what to do. You know, the dividing line is about 2000. Napster escaped into the wild on June 1st, 1999. And that really set off a series of events that the record industry had been ignoring throughout the 1990s. They knew that people were downloading stuff, but who cares? You had a 56 baud, baud modem that took 2 hours to download a single song. There were experiments. Aerosmith was the first band to actually make a song available for download, and there were experiments with e-commerce and that sort of thing. But the record industry thought they could A, sue all these new digital pioneers out of business, and B, it was just going to be a fad. People will always go back to hard copies or some sort of physical release that we are going to be in charge of. Well, that obviously did not work. And the record industry couldn't come together to create a digital storefront because that would have been an antitrust situation. They tried with a couple of different download stores that were hideously restrictive in what you could do with the music, and nobody cared, and they were just terrible. And then Steve Jobs comes along with iTunes saying that you guys can't do that. You don't know what you're doing. You're idiots. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up this iTunes music store. We're going to charge 99 cents for each individual song, and that's the way it's going to be. And the record industry, with really no other choice, signed on with Steve, with caveats. There was all this digital rights management originally, but those disappeared later. And music became much more liquid in the sense that it could flow around the world very, very quickly and flow into the devices of people virtually anywhere. Now, this begins to change even further with the rise of streaming. Now, the first streaming platform was called Rhapsody, came out in the very early 2000s.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
Rhapsody eventually bought the assets of Napster and rebranded itself as Napster. So in the world of legal streaming, there is a site called Napster.
Of course there is.
But by the time we get to Spotify was founded in 2006. It goes online 2008. And then other streaming music platforms follow, and that completely changes everything because, well, in the situation with Spotify, you could listen to tens of millions of songs back then for free or something very close to it. And this completely, along with music piracy, completely pulled the rug out from under physical sales. And physical sales dropped by over 85% between 2000 and 2012 or so. 80%. It might even be more, 90%.
Yeah.
CDs went into a free fall. Vinyl was no longer a thing. So it was all about trying to adapt to this new world of streaming. And the record labels had a really hard time adapting to this new technology. It wasn't until I think 2015 or 2016 that the majority of their revenue started coming from streaming deals.
Go ahead, Pete.
I was just going to say, you touched on a little bit on Steve Jobs, and yes, the coming of iTunes really kind of started consolidating things, or I guess it was a way for artists to be like, okay, at least we're going to get paid this way versus like losing it from a piracy perspective. But even the devices that came out shortly after, so the first generation of iPod, then all the smaller MP3 players and everything to that effect, what I think consumers at the time really enjoyed is the consolidation and kind of have all the different music or the audio files in your pocket, so to speak. I think Apple's tagline at the time was like over 5,000 songs in your pocket.
Steve Jobs had a fight with the marketing agency. They were saying, hey, this has got 5 gigs of memory. He says, no. It has 1,000 songs in your pocket.
Yeah.
And, that was pretty sexy because, at that point, we had, portable CD players, which were horrible.
Yeah.
We were trying to get away from cassettes, which were horrible. Mini discs did not catch on. They were pretty good, but they were not great. But, starting in the very late 80s, we started to get these digital players. Well, the first one I had was by RCA. It was called a Lyra. It was shaped like a big guitar pick, a triangular thing.
Oh, no way.
And it could hold 60 minutes of music at, I think, 32 kilobytes per second. So it sounded marginally better than an AM radio.
Fair.
But it was cool because I could go out jogging and nothing would skip. And it was so small.
Yeah.
But then, MP3 players came very close to being declared illegal in the late 90s when the record industry tried to sue them out of existence. But and when the iPod came along, it was the best of all possible worlds when it came to music players. And it became the highest selling consumer electronic product since, I think, the VCR.
It's fascinating to me, like the relationship. I always think about this. I took an organic chemistry course in university called Structure and Function. I could not tell you the first thing about the class other than the name of the course. And I always think about the name of the course being Structure and Function. Like the structure matters so much in terms of how things function. And when I think about things like, and here you're talking about the music industry, the MP3 player, the portable devices, and now iPhones and all that kind of stuff, the structure of the industry mattered so much in how it functioned. And so now you've got this radical, like transformational period where you've got iPods and MP3s and streaming, and it changes the idea of an album and album art, and then going through racks at the CD racks or record racks at the store to now something that you can look for, search for online.
Yeah, but is that as much fun?
And that's my point. Like that. When you were talking about, going to the record store, I love that. I used to go to the rock album or the rock section or the country section or the alternative section or whatever, and you'd bump into people and chat with people and see all that. But now you have all these algorithms that are kind of feeding music to you. And it's changing a lot how songs and artists are discovered. Somewhere around upwards of 60 to 100, you probably have the actual number. I've seen numbers like 60 to 100,000 songs are uploaded every day. So there's more and more competition.
Oh, no. It's about 103,000 songs a day.
That's crazy. That's insane. And there's some number about, and you could probably fill it in the blank on this one, what percentage of them are not listened to, but how do then artists break through in this new space in terms of more?
I have no idea, and nobody else knows. This is the problem. Right. Everything is changed. It's upside down. Now, there are people, including some very, talented mid-level musicians who are making a very good job, making a very good living through streaming. There are a billion people who will tell you how to do that, but it all comes down to this. Today, as we sit here, about 205 million songs are available on all the streaming music services. They all dip into the same library, 205 million. And in the old days, it used to be that you were competing with your peers and contemporaries because, it was all about new music. The old music was there as a comfort blanket, but security blanket, but it was all about what's new and what's next. Now things have changed. You, as a new artist, are not only competing with your peers and contemporaries, but you're competing with the greatest music of all time, which is available at your fingertip. You're competing with the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and Led Zeppelin and the Grateful Dead and Billie Holiday and, any other Led Zeppelin, AC/DC, any other band that you want to mention. That's your competition now. So not only do you have to be better than your peers and contemporaries, you have to be at least as good as these guys these people who wrote the greatest music of all time. It's very, very tough to break through. And, Taylor Swift did it, Beyonce did it, but I mean, the number of superstar acts that have emerged since 2000 is way down because you just, as a music fan, you've got just so much choice.
And it's really interesting because now there's more vehicles. Maybe I'm misinterpreting, but I believe there's more vehicles. You think about like the song contest, the shows that help to discover potential talent.
Those are distractions. Those don't move the needle at all. I mean, they're TV shows. They're variety. They're not even as compelling as Ed Sullivan used to be back in the day. Nowhere close.
Yeah.
what these TV shows, I mean, there have been almost zero stars. I mean, 3, 4, 0 stars to emerge out of all those TV talent shows. They've been failures. Has happened instead is that you have a, audience who is interested in talent shows. And secondly, you've perverted the idea of what it means to be an artist. Like a lot of these people sing cover songs, not their own.
Right.
And what they're doing is it's all about being famous versus being an artist. That's how they distorted the attitude of a lot of people. Well, I don't have to pay my dues. I can just get on TV and become famous.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those shows did more to harm the well-being of music than they did help it.
Thinking about there's so many ways I want to go with. Let me start with so Billie Eilish's album when it came out 2019. Won a few Grammys, sold millions of copies. One of the most downloaded songs of all time. Produced in her family's bedroom, I think, with her brother. And I'm kind of interested about, like, we have so much more music being uploaded and all that stuff. People striving to be famous. And the tools are becoming more and more capable from a prosumer point of view. The barrier of entry to get into the music industry is a lot less. So it's not about the album so much necessarily as it used to be. And now you've got individuals, artists that are just trying to be famous. Can you talk about just the change there in terms of quality or
Well, okay, you're right about the barrier to
product?
entry. It's really, really low. I mean, if you've got a laptop and a decent USB mic, there's a lot you can do.
Yeah.
You don't need to spend $1,500 a day renting a studio. It's just not necessary. Now, that's good. You can then also upload this music that you made at home to streaming music services for something very close to free. So you get global distribution immediately.
Yeah.
Problem is, you're dealing with 205 million other songs.
Yeah.
Now, Billie Eilish is a canary in a coal mine, or is an exception there because she was in the right place at the right time, managed to get a record deal, did some really good stuff social media wise, and blew up from there. But she is the exception. I mean, there are a lot of people who have gone that same route and done absolutely nothing. What do you think? How many songs do you think there are on just Spotify that no one's ever heard? Ever?
I couldn't even fathom to guess.
I'll tell you, 25%. So 25% of 25% of all the songs uploaded to Spotify have never been heard once. So if you're dealing with roughly 200 million songs, that's 50 million songs that are sitting on servers somewhere, consuming tremendous amounts of electricity that no one cares about.
It's wild.
Oh, man.
There's so many parallels between just the music industry and regular business. Like, there's so many businesses and products and stuff out there that are just out there, but nobody buys it, nobody consumes it.
Yeah, I mean, if you're famous today, you are a unicorn. Now, famous is it has taken on a different thing too. There's traditional fame, which means you get records on the radio or songs on the radio, you sell albums, you get a lot of playlist postings, you get a lot of streams, you sell a lot of concert tickets. That's one sort of fame. Then there's the other sort of fame, which is you're a niche artist and you super serve a fan base that is tremendously loyal. I'll give you an example. The Lumineers. We can probably name one or two songs by the Lumineers, but oddly enough, they can fill arenas with hardcore fans, despite not having multiple radio hits. There's jam bands like Fish, for example, that can do exactly the same thing. Never had a song on the radio, yet they are capable of headlining festivals. So there's those two different types of fame. There's the general mainstream fame, where everybody knows about you, Taylor Swift, Beyonce, Billie Eilish, Justin Bieber, Drake, The Weeknd, all those. And then there are these other niche fame bands who are nevertheless doing extremely well, but you don't hear about them because the media doesn't cover them. But fans will talk your ears off.
Yeah.
Okay, I have to ask this. I grew up in an era, during the 90s, MTV was the way that you kind of discovered music videos. They were the first ones that were kind of shit. Hey, here's what's coming down. But I would also on the weekend listen to the country music top 100. I think it's the top 100. And now we have YouTube. There's TikTok, Instagram, Reels, and all of that. When we think about how social media has impacted the distribution of a lot of this music, Where do you think that this will continue to evolve? Because we are seeing almost a resurgence of more traditional styles of discoverability. However,
a little bit, yes.
We still think like the distribution around these digital channels are still going to be the way forward. How do you believe like the industry will continue to evolve in that space?
Well, at the moment, it continues to fragment, and it's not just music; it's all media. Now, I don't know. Do either of you guys have a smart TV? Okay,
I don't actually. I was just looking at some, but
okay. Well, okay. Give me an example. So I'm on tour. I end up in a hotel room. Here's what I'm noticing about hotel rooms. Hotel room TVs are terrible now because you either are expected to cast whatever you've got on your device to the screen.
That's true.
Or they give you some sort of smart TV access. Now, it used to be that you would have a lot of cable channels and you can just flip through the guide and that's what I want to watch. Not anymore. So I was in Nelson, BC, and I had this TV on my wall and it had no cable access. So no Weather Network, no TSN, no, CBC, nothing, none of that. What they had was Samsung's smart TV offerings. So, okay, well, I'm bored. I'm going to flip through the channels. And I ran across a channel called Nosy. And I don't know where it comes from. I don't know anything about it, but there it was. And all Nosy does is show reruns of Jerry Springer, Maury, and Steve Wilkos. That's all they show. That is how specific and niche TV has become. So I started flipping through more. And here's the Beverly Hills channel. Beverly Hillbillies channel. There was a Matlock channel. There was a NCIS channel. Okay, and then I got home and I started going through Pluto TV.
Yeah.
And Pluto TV is something called it's a fast channel, so it's free ad-supported television. You just have to watch a couple of ads. In other words, the way it used to be.
TV.
And there was a giant selection, and it's all linear, so you can't fast forward or rewind. It's all linear. This giant selection of shows grouped by category for South Park. So there was the Cartman collection, the Kyle collection, the Stan collection, the Kenny collection, the Canadian collection. All they were just South Park shows. I spend a lot of my time now on Pluto watching old Top Gear shows because there's a Top Gear channel.
Yeah.
So everything is being diced so finely.
Yeah.
And so these tiny little niches. It's like there's no such thing as mainstream anymore. I mean, there's a thin layer at the top.
Yeah.
But I mean, you look at network television today, and it's like, okay, it's September. Okay, The Simpsons are going to have a premiere. Okay, I know that. But what else is big, returning or premiering this fall? I have no idea because. There's just so much coming at us from all directions. Netflix, Amazon. It was announced today that Walmart is starting a free streaming music channel. It's so if I'm a content creator and I'm creating new content, I'm again having to compete with 70 years of old TV content. So, if I'm not watching what's premiered on ABC or CBS or CBC or CTV this fall, I'm watching old Top Gear channels on Pluto, which are paid for. This is the thing for the broadcaster and the rights holder. All these shows are paid for. Catalog is where the money is right now because it's pure profit. The record industry is in the same boat right now. About 24% of all streaming listening today is done to songs less than 18 months old. Everything else is done to songs more than 18 months. It's like 76% of streaming listening is tied to listening to songs that are more than 18 months old. We're also seeing, if you look at the charts, you're seeing older songs. For Hozier, for example, his debut album is still on the charts, even though he's got a new record and is touring behind it. Your old material has a much longer lifespan than your new material. So your old material is overlapping with your new album. And you can't get your new album to get traction because your old album is still popular. Then there's another situation So you have all these large companies like Primary Wave and Concord Music Publishing and BMG Music Rights. They're buying up all these catalogs for artists like Bruce Springsteen and Queen and Bob Dylan and so on. And what they do is that they are giving an artist a multiple of what they believe their music will earn over the next X number of years. All this is very negotiable. And based on that number that they come up with, a company will offer the artist X million dollars for the rights to all their songs up until this particular date. So this is kind of like going to a petty advance place. You get all your money for your music up front, and you let somebody else worry about them turning a profit and covering those costs. Yeah. Now, why would an artist do this? Well, if you're towards the end of your career,
security.
It gives you security, gives you a chance to get into philanthropy or activism or investments or what estate planning, all that sort of stuff. That's one thing. But the second thing is, and nobody ever talks about this, if you are getting royalties in the bank, in the mail every 6 months, that's a salary. The government will look at that as a salary, and you'll be taxed at the highest marginal tax rate if you're a successful artist. But if you take all your money up front in a publishing deal with one of these big companies, that's capital gains, and you are taxed at 20%. So why wouldn't you save 30% on your taxes?
Absolutely.
That's what's happening right now. And it's not just older acts. I mean, bands like Imagine Dragons and the Killers have done this.
Yeah, I think Justin Bieber did that recently too, didn't he?
$200 million with Hypnosis.
Yeah.
And what this does is it allows them security. They can do whatever the hell they want for the rest of their careers and not worry about a thing, because they've got tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in the bank. Not a problem.
Speaking of
wait, and I'm not done. So these companies have shelled out hundreds of millions of dollars for these songs. Now, the way it works with copyright is that nothing enters the public domain until the last living composer of a song dies. Okay? So let's say Bruce Springsteen dies today, and his music is owned by Sony. His publishing is owned by Sony. If he dies today, public domain copyright law says that that company that bought his music has the next 75 years to exploit that music and turn it into revenue. So in the year 2100, Bruce Springsteen will if he dies today, his music will finally go into the public domain in 2100. Okay? Now, over the next 75 years, that company is going to have to find a way to recoup their investment. They are going to have to keep that music alive for the next 75 years to get back their $550 million plus a profit for their shareholders. So if this music, which would normally have died out, a natural death as music continues to turn over with new artists coming in and releasing new material, that music is going to be preserved alive through reissues and cover versions and samples and interpolations and licensing for the next 75 years. And that is going to squeeze out opportunities for new artists.
I want to ask about thinking about the future. The Weeknd came out with an AI version of himself to promote an album. There's things like DJs and playlists. Oasis came out with a new pricing model. They just played in Toronto recently that everybody was up in arms about. Thinking about the companies that have the Bruce Springsteen rights and thinking about their forecast of, we got to make a profit back in 75 years. How do you think things like AI and there was who was it? The hologram from a couple of years ago. You know what I mean? Like there's
the holograms
how is that going to influence how companies are making and promoting artists.
The holograms are part of that original thing. You want to keep the artist alive and exploiting their music as much as possible. So some of these rights management people, along with the estates of these dead artists, I mean, they're holograms and that sort of thing. That's one of the vehicles that they're going to use. As for AI, oh God, that's an entirely new thing. The AI thing, it's either going to be a tool that's going to help a lot of artists develop new material and create new stars, new genres, and a whole bunch of other things, or it's going to be the death of the music industry because people are using AI to game the system. And, if you're, look, I can give you an example. I'm a record label. I'm basically in the business of selling noise to audiences. And this noise comes from all these really uppity creative types that get drunk, get high, they die, they're not inspired, they don't work to any particular schedule. Oh, they're just annoying. So what if this is happening? Record labels are quietly writing into their contracts that they have the right to exploit the AI versions of the artists that they're signing. So if okay, I'll give you an example that's sort of adjacent to this. I do a lot of voiceover work, and I know that's what's happening in studios where they're doing voice work, commercial work, that sort of thing. Engineers are cloning voices that they like and using them via AI in their commercial narrations. Totally illegal, totally, completely nuts. I can see in the next 2-3 years, I'm going to lose a lot of work to AI voices. And that really annoys me. Now, there are some AI gigs voiceover gigs that I do that are long, drawn out, boring, clinical, technical narrations. You don't necessarily need a real human being for that, although it does help. But I can see that part of my work going away. I really can. In fact, I may have even lost one client that I'm thinking of that they haven't been back to me in a while. And I'm thinking they're saving some money on me by having some AI voice do it. Now, my option would be to find, here's a new job for the future, AI voice agent. I license my voice to an AI voice agent.
I was just going to say this. Yeah.
To other people. And then all I got to do is sit back and collect the checks. But I mean, the legal and there's just so many pitfalls with that right now. It's going to happen. I know it's going to happen. It's just a matter of when. Same thing with music. We had a band called the Velvet Sundown show up earlier this year. That was this California, hippy dippy, soft rock, yacht rock band. And, they ended up having millions of listens on Spotify. Well, turned out they were completely an AI creation from the albums that they released to the promo pictures they put out. And it was a big scandal. But you know what? There's already a number. I mean, we've had virtual artists before. We can go all the way back to the Archies and Sugar Sugar in 1969. This is a bunch of comic book characters and a bunch of studio musicians put together. And then, there's been Prozac, there's been Gorillaz, there's been a bunch of others, but we've never seen it at this level.
Yeah.
I'll give you another example. Meta is in big trouble right now because they took some celebrities, their voices, their images, and turned them into AI chatbots without permission. Oh, you idiots. So, yeah, there's a lot going on here.
So with all these shifts, what do you think the next major milestone in music marketing will be?
I think you're probably starting to see it. Okay. Back in the late 90s, record labels didn't care about the internet. It interfered with their business. But some people in the office said, you know what, we should have a website. So, okay, we'll have, the nerdy kid in the office built the website. Then eventually they had an entire online divisions based on that. When social media became a thing, it's like, you know what, we really should have somebody monitoring social media. Okay, well, we'll get this intern out of school to look and see what's hot on social media. Now there were whole departments of record labels that have taken the place of traditional A&R people who go scouting for bands. They're just sitting on TikTok and Instagram looking for stars.
Yeah.
So now somebody's saying, well, we should get into AI. And the nerdy kid will do the AI stuff. But now you're going to need a whole AI division. And what that can do is uncharted. It really is, because all the indications with AI are pointing to it being the biggest disruption in technology production consumption.
Absolutely.
Since the Industrial Revolution. It is so powerful. It's iterating so quickly. And right now, no matter what you see, it's the worst it's going to be. It's only going to get better. So that's what I think we're going to see, is some sort of, multiple applications of AI when it comes to marketing music. And the music that may be marketed may not be made by a human.
Interesting things. Is there any specific lesson or takeaway that you think marketers who are not in the music industry should learn from those in the music industry?
Yeah. Don't get your head out of your butt when it comes to technology. I mean, you can rail against, social media and, it's awful and it does all these terrible things. Guess what? It's here to stay. You can rail against AI and how it's going to, turn into Skynet and basically bring down humanity. Guess what? It's here to stay. So if you don't learn about and take advantage of these new tools, and they can be new tools for you, you're going to be left behind. You're going to be making buggy whips, and it's just the way it's going to be. You can hate it, but you're just cursing at the darkness.
Alan, this has been incredible. How can people find out more about the work that you continue to do, or just find out more information in general?
Okay, my website is alancross.ca, ALAN cross.ca. I'm on all the social media platforms. I've got a podcast called The Ongoing History of New Music. I've got another true crime podcast called Uncharted, Crime and Mayhem in the Music Industry.
Oh.
And you can always email me, alan@alancross.ca. I answer all my email and I'll get right back to you.
Love this. Awesome. Thanks so much for your time today.
All right, you're very welcome.
If you like this show, please leave a review. And even if you didn't, we'd love to make this show better, and your feedback will help us do that.